Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So we're moving right along through our mini-series about The Haunting of Hill House. Normally each episode, what we do is a review of one horror movie, but we decided to change things up a little bit here at the end of the year and do a review of a horror series that a lot of people had recommended to us. So we've already done the first 4 episodes, and so this week we'll be talking about episodes 5 and 6. Last week we did episodes 3 and 4, and the week before that was 1 and 2, so you might want to go back and check those out before you listen to this one if you haven't already, or don't. Live your own life. Do what you want to do. And before we get started with this, I need to do something that I find incredibly painful.
Ugh.
I have to say that you were right.
I know.
In episode 4, in episode 4, when you said that what she handed him was a $10 bill, you were right. I thought that it was drugs. I thought it was a little plastic bag,
okay.
But it definitely was a $10 bill. I went back and double checked. So,
yeah,
congratulations.
Just enough to get him to the tech. Yeah.
So, anyway, also with
feels good.
Yeah.
I want to kind of bask in this for a minute.
Yeah, I was going to say cherish it. Hold on to it. Feel free to replay this. I know how you are.
Oh my god.
Also, with episodes 3 and 4, we saw a transition where they kind of focused very closely on one character. Yep. And we had speculated about how is that pattern going to continue when there are only like 5 siblings. And I think we got a little bit of an answer to that with episode 6, because episode 5 definitely kept that same style with Nell, but then when it got to episode 6, it really broke that mold, and it was a whole family type thing. Yeah. So it looks like maybe that'll kind of be interleaved throughout the rest of the series, and really they're just going to kind of do what they want format-wise, but from what I've seen so far, I trust them and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still curious on if they'll do one on the Dudleys.
Yes, I would really like to see that.
Yeah, because I have my theories about them.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Should we play the spoiler warning and then get to the recap?
Let's do it.
Warning. Spoilers. This is your warning. Warning. Spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough. Warning, spoilers.
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick recap of each episode, and here we go.
All right.
Episode 5 is all about Nell, the youngest sister. In the 1992 timeline, it replays her scenes encountering a ghost who she calls the Bent Neck Lady when she wakes up in the middle of the night. It also shows her getting in trouble for writing her name on the wall in a place where the wallpaper is peeling, but Theo believes Nell when she says she didn't do it. You also see a flashback of the dad and the kids at a motel after escaping from the house on the night when the mom died. In the recent and present day timelines, you see Nell go to a sleep technologist named Arthur about her sleep paralysis and nightmares. The two of them start to date and eventually get married, and Arthur helps bring her out of it when she wakes up with sleep paralysis. Things are going really well until one night when Nell wakes up and sees the Bent Neck Lady for the first time in 2 years. Arthur gets up, can't see her, turns on the lights, and has a brain aneurysm and dies. After an extended period of dissolving relationships with friends and family, Nell's therapist recommends that she go back to Hill House to confront it, thinking that seeing it as just a dilapidated old house will help her move on. He couldn't have been more wrong. Episode 6 is about the whole family. The present day part takes place entirely in Shirley's funeral home, and the flashbacks are all of one night in Hill House. In both timelines, there is a storm that knocks out the power. In the 1992 timeline, the mom tells Nell that she sees people in the house too, and then Nell disappears and the family has to search for her in the house. In the 2018 timeline, the grief over Nell's death brings a lot of issues to the surface, and the siblings fight with each other and their father. Shirley finds out that her husband Kevin and her sister Theo both accepted money from Stephen's book, and then she kicks Theo out. She later catches Kevin and Theo in a compromising position in the basement. The episode ends without a lot of resolution and a lot of broken relationships. So
it was some pretty intense episodes that we watched.
They were. This is super dense. I have a ton of notes. Now that we're about halfway through, a little over halfway through the series, I feel like we finally got some answers on a couple of the bigger questions of the series. But obviously, it also created a bunch of new questions as well.
Right.
So yeah. So we got a lot to get into, but before we do, what did you learn this week?
What did I learn this week? So I got 2 of them. This week, I learned that the actor who played Nell's psychiatrist, his name was Russ Tamblyn, Tamblyn. He played Luke Sanderson in The Haunting.
Oh, in the movie version.
The movie version, the 1963. So, which was the original adaptation of it. Also, his name was Dr. Montague, and he was named after Dr. John Montague, a main character in a Shirley Jackson novel. Shirley Jackson's the one who wrote the book about it. I knew something was up when she said Dr. Montague. I was like, that sounds way too familiar, and that's just like a way too off of a name to give a psychiatrist, so it's like something's up with that. Let's see. The second thing, kind of, but in episode 6, I noticed that there were a ton of long shots.
Yes.
So I read that like the first 15 minutes of the episode 6 were done in a straight take.
Yeah.
No edits or anything.
Oh wow.
The episode actually consists of 5. I think it was 5 long takes. The longest being the third, I guess, which was 17 minutes. I mean, I noticed at the beginning, because one thing I pointed out was one thing I liked was when the dad came in and it circled the camera around and it showed the younger kids.
That's in my notes as well. I love that scene. That was so good.
So I noticed that, but then I got to thinking about it after I read it, and when Nell shows up at the end, shows up at the house, that seems like it's just one extremely long take. So, which we'll get into, but I thought that was a super just, it seems like they're just going for it in this series, and they're just like, let's just do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I had mentioned before about how episode 6 was kind of a break from the format in that it wasn't focused on one character, but I thought that it was also a big break from the format in style for exactly the reason that you just said. Yeah. Basically, because a lot of the other ones had relied on the flashbacks a lot to tell the story, but this one, it was like the camera was just with them the whole time, and you had people kind of coming in and out of the funeral home with these big open spaces, and then eventually the dad goes down and he's walking back to the bathroom, and then that hall turns into the hall in Hill House, and then he sees the people. So they even did the scene transitions as part of that one long timeline transitions as part of that one long unbroken shot, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, with that scene specifically, he goes down and it goes into the story, and then it comes out in Luke's it goes in with him and it comes out to Luke telling the story or something. Anyway, so that was just a really long transition, and the line that it took was crazy. And,
So episode 5 was called The Bent Neck Lady.
Yeah.
And this episode gave us a ton of information. We had talked before about how what happened with Nell at the house on the night in the first episode was one of the big mysteries of the show. And that finally got answered. And it also filled in a lot about why the other siblings reacted the way that they did when she called them in the first episode. And it told a lot more about how she went from being married and happy, like you've seen her in some of the recent flashbacks, to like Desperate and back at Hill House. So overall, I thought it was great from a storytelling perspective. And I didn't necessarily think that this was going to be one of my favorite episodes at about the halfway mark, because it started kind of slow. Mm-hmm. But by the end, it really came together. And I think it had one of the best horror sequences of the series, but was also probably the best episode so far from a storytelling perspective in what it contributed to kind of the overall experience of the story of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, like when I was watching it, so episode 5 basically kind of starts off with basically it's like a montage of like happy, good things that are happening, and so And so, like, I felt like, okay, they're setting this up because you know that Nell dies, obviously, from the, earlier episodes.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, are you just making this, like, extra, like, good for us so then we feel bad as a viewer that, how it happens. But anyway, like, the episode was crazy because it was filled with information that was almost like too much not that I'm it's not a complaint, like I'll take it, but it was just like, oh my god, wait, this happens, and it just seemed like it was like a 2-hour episode pushed into like 50 minutes. So.
It really covered a lot of ground, and in the very, very beginning of the episode, it showed the flashbacks of her experiences with the bent neck lady in the house that we'd already seen.
Yeah.
And I thought that was weird because it's like, we've already seen these scenes. Why is that being brought back? And that was because they wanted to establish the continuity for the end of the episode, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I really thought this one did a great job of bringing, it was like the first closed loop in the story, because we have all of these flashbacks from the very beginning, and then we have all this stuff happening now, and I felt like more than any other, this episode created continuity between those and like related them and tied it all up in a way that nothing has happened in this series so far, because everything else is just a bunch of kind of different threads of story. So
I'm sure she'll come back in a later episode or something. It's just this way this TV show works. One thing I thought was kind of interesting with episode 5 was the whole sleep paralysis thing.
Yeah. Because
I get sleep paralysis.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, but it's not like I'll get it sometimes in the middle of the night, but it really hits me like if I try to take a nap. That's why I never nap. Because I always I can go to sleep, but then so it's a crazy thing. I mean, obviously, like some people have had visions.
Well, do you have the anxiety and stuff with it? Does your body freak out when it happens?
Yeah, man. You can't move. I've only had it a couple times where my eyes were open. So you normally if I have a TV going and I fall asleep on the couch or whatever, I hear the TV. If my eyes are closed, you can't open your mouth. My mouth is closed when I'm sleeping, so you can only breathe through, and so I hyperventilate trying to wake up because I'm stuck, and you can't really move. So that's why with Katie, if she knows I'm tired and cranky, she's like just come over here, lay down, take a nap by me, and if I'll wake you up, and we have I've been really worn out, had to lay down, and I usually I'll have my arm kind of around her or whatever, and sometimes you can move your fingers a little bit, and you kind of twitch, and she'll wake me up from it. The real anxiety is not being able to breathe, and then you immediately want to go back to sleep. Your body's immediately wanting to go back to sleep, so you have to wake up. And it used to hit me a lot when we were in the band.
Really? I didn't realize that. Yeah.
When I lived on my own, so I'd wake up and watch TV and be up, starting at 4 o'clock in the morning. But
because we'd be driving all night to get back, and then
it's crazy.
It's throwing off the sleep schedule and stuff.
Yeah, but it's a crazy. No, I haven't ever had I think for me the sleep paralysis was that it was something else that she had, because like you can't move like to get up out of bed like when her husband died. Like that was like, I don't know. That was strange, but it's a weird thing.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's crazy. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. But yeah, it sounds like that kind of checks out. I mean, at least as far as how it's portrayed in the show for the most part is like a real thing. And
I mean, people have like visions, like that's like a known thing. Like you see, because your body's asleep, or what is it?
Your brain's awake.
Basically, but like you still have the dream stuff going. So like your brain's like still messing with you. So it sees things. And like, there's been one night, I think I thought I saw like a figure in the corner, and it like trips you out. But it's just crazy because you're aware of everything that's going on. Like if someone's having a conversation, I was going through that, I could hear them. Like I could hear Katie say like, Bryce, wake up, Bryce. You know, like I can hear her say that. But
wow. Yeah, so one thing that I thought was interesting about the episode was that they gave a very scientific sounding explanation for what she was going through, but I didn't know how accurate it was. Like, I didn't know if that was one of those things where in the physics of the show this is true, or if it was really like that's how real life works, but it sounds like that's pretty close, so that's cool. But I thought it was interesting that they offered a scientific explanation. So they showed the experiences that she was having as a kid, and then you see her talking to a medical professional who's saying, no, there's actually a legitimate, medical explanation of why you would have experienced that doesn't have anything to do with haunting. Yeah. And going back to, what kind of like Theo and Steven had said in previous episodes, that makes you wonder, is it a real thing? Was there really a haunting going on, or was this just a combination of mental illness and sleep paralysis? And so it kind of established that skepticism early. Yeah. And then it went into that montage like you were talking about, where everything's super happy and she's dating, and then they get married and everything's great. And then she has, another episode, and he kind of walks her through waking up, and she comes out of it and everything's fine. And you're like, okay, well, maybe she's moving on. Why did she end up back at the house? And then the scene happens where Arthur's helping her wake up at a later time, and she sees the bent neck lady. He obviously doesn't. He gets out of bed to turn on the light, and then just like his head jerks. And I thought that his neck bent in the same way as hers initially, but I don't know that necessarily was true. It may have just been he was portraying having a brain aneurysm and fell down, and that's kind of what it looked like by coincidence. So at that point, you're pulled right back into it because you saw him die, so you know that there's danger, but you've also seen, I guess you don't know the boundaries of that danger.
Yeah, I think that's like, I mean, it was incredibly sad. Like, you knew that he had, I don't know, like just watching the show, it's like, okay, well, he has to go somehow. And like for that to be the way, like if that were just in any normal TV show, it's like, God dang, that's,
brutal,
super sad and messed up. Like you just watched your spouse die and there's nothing you could do about it. God. Ugh.
Yeah, and after that, I thought it was interesting, the sort of the arc of her life, of how she sort of was in that relationship, and it seemed like she was on the upswing and headed to a good place. Yeah, and then things just completely fell apart once he was out of the picture. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like if you went through that experience and you saw your spouse die, and you were once again back into this like cycle of those visions and stuff like you'd had as a kid that you thought you were finally over, that probably would mess you up a lot. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, they do the whole portrayal of happy life, getting married, all that, and then like after it's all done, she's, when she confronts Steven at a book reading, and basically saying like, you don't believe in this, like they get in an argument afterward. Steven's like, we've been through all these phases, like this is just another transition to another phase. You had your something phase, you had your crystal phase, you had, it's just like, oh, so she was also addicted, like she didn't want to go to sleep. I assume, from doing crystal.
I thought he meant like the natural healing crystals.
Oh,
and stuff.
Could have. I was thinking crystal meth.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe that was mostly Luke, but who knows?
Well,
yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was because the context, it was like you had your what was it, something like grunge face.
He said like Christian, and I think maybe like Buddhist and stuff. So he was going through all the different systems of belief, I guess. But, yeah. But yeah, so she had the big confrontation with him, the big fight with Theo, and then all of that. And for a while, I was like, where is this going? Because this is just a bunch more of like family drama and people feeling sad. And but then she is in the psychologist's office, and he tells her, everything that you talk about always seems to go back to that house. Yeah. And it's just a house. Maybe if you went and saw it, that it was just this carcass of a house and not some evil monster, that would help you move past everything. And that really was the point that caught my attention, and I was like, oh, that's how this all comes together. That's what this was all headed toward.
Right.
And so then she travels back to Boston and ends up staying in the same motel where her dad took the kids on the night when the mom died. Yeah.
Which was like a really cool transition.
Yes.
That was one of the cooler transitions too. Up to that point was, she was sitting in the car, looked at the pocket watch, and then the headlights pulled in, and it was them, back in the past, pulling into that hotel room or motel room.
Well, and it also felt like almost, I don't know how to describe it right, but it's like as she had made the decision to go back to the house and then traveled to be near it, then all of a sudden there's even more overlap in the timelines, and you're seeing more of what happened, and you're getting more like information that you didn't have before about it. And so I just thought that was kind of cool. As she was getting closer, it was almost like the timelines were converging a little bit more. Yeah. When throughout the episode they'd seemed a lot more like scattershot. So that I thought, just from a writing and directing point of view, was really cool.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was really interesting that the dad went back for the mom, because I feel like that wasn't a piece of information that we had before. So he drops the kids off at the motel, he goes back, and then several hours later comes back, and only Nell is awake. And so she goes outside to see him, and he's like covered in blood, and the mom isn't there.
Right. And
then the cops show up, and the dad says it's okay, that he had called them, but that he's going to have to go with them, and that the aunt will be there soon to pick them up. So that almost makes it look like the dad was involved with her death. I mean, it raises suspicion, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I'm kind of curious, because they talk about like when Janice shows up to the funeral, so this is kind of jumping ahead just a tiny bit, but they talk about, she only watched him for a little bit, so it makes you wonder, like, did the dad go to jail for something, something involving, and I wonder, I bet they'll touch base on it.
Yeah. But, to me, that's still, like, what happened with the mom and what happened on that night and immediately after is still one of the big mysteries that haven't been answered on the show, for sure.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But I liked that this episode included a little bit more information about it.
Yeah, it's they're doing a really good job at expanding the story, or like explaining the story as it goes on. It seems like each episode you get more and more. Yeah. Which we're over halfway through now, so it's gonna be coming pretty strong here pretty soon, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finishing the story out.
Yeah, and one thing that you pointed out, I think it was at the end of the second episode, where on the model house in Shirley's funeral home, the light flashed twice, and the mom had mentioned before about how when she flashed it twice, people needed to come home, come inside. And I realized that happens a ton throughout the series. Like, that's worked in a lot. But when Nell first pulled up to Hill House and was in the driveway, and the lights all come on, and then the porch light flashes twice, I thought that was amazing. Yeah,
I did too. I was like, oh, shoot, here it comes,
Yeah.
But, it makes you wonder, is it the mom doing that, or is it, some other figure,
Yeah.
showing, I don't know.
I feel like we are definitely, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into the episode 6 stuff, but I feel like we're definitely getting some strong hints that maybe either the mom was becoming possessed by something in the house, or something in the house was presenting itself as the mom.
Yeah, I think it's the possession personally.
Yeah.
Just based off of some of the issues that she ran into in episode 6, but
yeah,
the last thing with episode 5 though, like the whole montage of Nell being in the house was just amazing.
Yeah. So
you have her like, it's like she walks in and it's like she's seeing something totally different than what's going on, and so like she's going upstairs and her family's there, and you find out that the mom was the one who wrote "Welcome Home, Nell" on the wall that she got in trouble for when she was a kid. And anyway, like it's just this whole beautiful montage. Like she ends up, her whole family's there, everyone's happy, her now deceased husband's there, and they're dancing through the house, and so it'll show like a beautiful music and lights and everything's clean and beautiful, and then it'll flash to what's really happening, and she's dancing by herself throughout the house, and it's like dark and
completely abandoned, falling apart house, but she's in like a trance, like almost like a zombie state. Yeah,
and then she goes upstairs to the red door room. I don't know, man, it's crazy. Abigail was there, which I think she has a bigger part in what's coming up too, for sure.
Yep.
Abigail was there, and I think
so it was the mom, Abigail, and Luke, and it was kind of at the end of this whole big sequence where she is in the house and she's kind of out of it because like what's happening doesn't make any sense, but she's just so happy, and it's all of her siblings as kids and her mom's there, and then she sees her siblings as adults, and Luke is there and he's clean and not on drugs, and then she sees her husband, and then everything's just great, but you as the viewer are seeing these flashes of what's really happening, which is none of that. It's just her in the house by herself. So there's something weird going on. So the more happy she gets as it goes along, the more like terrified you are because it's not real. And I noticed at one point, while you mentioned they're like dancing, and there's that scene where they're dancing around, in the background at one point you see the people that were at the wedding, so like the siblings in their nice clothes, and then you also see people that you don't recognize, one of whom is definitely the ghost that was following Luke in the 4th episode.
That guy.
Yeah. So we had talked before about not knowing if it was, just another person in the house, or if it was one ghost, or if it was multiple ghosts. That definitely makes it seem like there's multiple ghosts in the house. And so that was really interesting, but it didn't give you a lot more information. But then all of that sort of ends with Nell following the mom, Abigail, and Luke up the stairs, and they get are about to go through the door, and then the mom turns around and gives her the locket that she had asked for when she was a kid. And when she puts the locket around her neck, all of a sudden she has a hard time breathing, and then all of a sudden she finds herself standing on the outside of the railing with a noose around her neck. And she doesn't know how she got there, and she's like crying, and then the mom walks forward and kisses her on the head, and then she just falls and is hanging there. And her neck snaps. But then instead of that being the end of the episode, which I expected, you see her all of a sudden fall through the floor over and over, and each time she does, she becomes the bent neck lady in all of the scenes where you had seen that happen before. So all of this time through her whole life that she had been seeing the bent neck lady, it was actually a vision of herself in the future hanging there in the house. Which
it's insane.
Damn. Like, that was crazy. I think Sarah and I both held our breath for like the last 10 minutes of this episode because it was that intense. Yeah,
man. It was super intense, this episode. It was,
But
they set it up. I mean, it was beautifully done too.
Yes, yeah.
That was the thing. It was like I didn't feel like there were any cheap shots in this. Like the whole, and I think it kind of helped being the long shots because like there's no break, But it was very good.
Yeah, and that very first scene because when she walks into the house, everything's lit up and bright, and you see like the kids running around, and you almost wonder if it's like just another flashback transition. But then she's interacting with them, and that first cut where I think it was Theo that like took her hand, or maybe it was Shirley that was taking her like to go change clothes. And then all of a sudden it just cuts to like the camera kind of up to the side, and it's her in the empty house with her hand out like she's holding someone's hand and walking.
Yeah.
And you realize what's happening. That gave me chills. And that was so intense. And the way that they kept working that back in, like, because we've talked before about how my biggest fear is that type of situation where you're just so completely out of it that like what you're experiencing isn't reality. Yeah. And you're just like disconnected and completely unaware of it, and like you can't trust your mind or any of your senses. Like that stuff freaks me out to start with, and so that whole sequence really was just uncomfortable and kind of bothered me for a while afterwards.
Yeah, it definitely helps that we're doing 2 episodes because I wouldn't have been able to stop after that episode.
Yeah, for sure. And it was good to have something else to think about afterwards.
Yeah, I was just like, God, that's so good.
Yeah. But then one thing too, and my only other comment on this episode, and we've been super long-winded, so we'll have to get through 6 faster, but I thought it was interesting that she never went into the Red Room. Because isn't that what Shirley said in the first episode? Didn't she say Nell's in the Red Room?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe they'll kind of touch base on what actually happened, because that happened the night. Didn't that happen the night that they left? Isn't that what Shirley was saying? That she went up there, or did I make that up?
I thought it was the same night when Nell died, but...
Oh, okay.
But it does get a little hard to keep track of with all the jumping.
Yeah. Sorry, that's true. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll see. But yeah, overall, did a great job of kind of tying up that whole storyline, telling you what happened that night, giving you a lot of information. So, episode 5 is probably my favorite of the series so far.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So on to episode 6, which was called 2 Storms. As you already mentioned, the thing that stood out to me the most in this one was definitely the camera work. Like it was just that one long, continuous shot. But what was cool about that was that allowed them to kind of show what was happening from multiple perspectives. So the camera would kind of like rotate over behind a person, and then you would like see the room as they were seeing it, and then it would keep rotating, and then you would see the room as everyone else was seeing it. And so they did kind of some cool stuff with that. I thought, it was definitely a different type of episode, but the general premise was the whole family in 2018 has gathered at Shirley's funeral home for Nell's funeral, and there's like a big storm and the power gets knocked out. And then in 1992, the whole family is together in Hill House when there's a big storm and the power gets knocked out, and then Nell goes missing and the parents have to find her. So there's a lot of parallels between the two. And a lot of those like long unbroken shots and not nearly as much like jumping back and forth. So I thought that was really cool. But I've got just kind of a handful of things that stood out to me as far as like things that may be significant to the plot later on from this one. But anything in particular about this episode that really stood out to you?
So it seemed like there's actually a little bit more humor in this episode, I thought.
Yeah, I think so.
I wondered if they had to do that because episode 5 was so heavy. But yeah, they seemed like there was a little bit more humor. It confused the hell out of me that all these people were drinking alcohol straight and not making a face when they were doing it.
Yeah.
Like I'll have like a really nice whiskey, like with my father-in-law, and like just sipping it, and like each time I sip it, I go, ugh, like you just go, ooh.
Yeah.
But it's just not enjoyable to me. So it was like every time they did that, I think I was kind of focused on that aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they, one thing, really important thing is you come to find out that the dad is having like visions of his dead deceased wife.
Mm-hmm.
But she's almost like the common sense,
Yeah.
It's, it's like, is it actually a vision or like, I don't know. It's something I hope that they, expand on a little bit more.
So do you think that's who he was talking to all the times that he was like kind of, because Stephen accused him of talking to himself, but it always looked like he was kind of looking to the left as he was doing it?
Yeah.
Do you think he was talking to the wife?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know who else it could have been. But you have him talking to her, so you know that that he's also affected by it. There's still that tension between the kids and the dad, so you're not sure why or what specific, because of we still don't know what's gone down to make them all seem to hate him.
Well, yeah, and I really liked when Steven got super drunk mad at him and was talking about how he like indulged Nell and Luke in the mom's mental illness instead of getting them help.
Yeah.
So that I thought was very interesting, just from the perspective of like his, or at least I think there's enough evidence there to say that he blames the dad for the mom killing herself, because instead of getting her help, he allowed her to kind of continue with whatever it was, that she believed about the house or whatever else. He maybe thinks the same thing about blaming the dad for Nell for letting her grow up, thinking these weird things about the house and so on. But it was also interesting that Luke took a very opposite approach, in that Luke was talking to the dad as like, you're one of the only people here that gets it. Like, she didn't do this, right?
Right.
And so I don't think that there was necessarily, because where my mind was going with it was like, if the dad, after the scenes in the motel, do the kids think that the dad killed the mom? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer based on this episode is definitely no. I think that there are other reasons why the relationship is complicated.
Yeah. Also, they're all kind of just like whiny. The kids.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, come on.
This episode especially. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, you're talking about your dad having problems, and yet you guys are like fixing things by drinking alcohol as much as possible. You got a drug addict brother.
Yeah.
All while your sister's dead in the other room. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Well, I will come back to that point at the end, because I have another theory. But, yeah. And like you said, that scene in the beginning where the dad first comes in and the camera circles around behind him, and then he sees all the kids as they were when they were young. I have to think that's kind of what it's like as a parent sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, especially as a parent of like older kids, or like grown up children. I thought that was really cool. That was a really, really good way to like humanize him, because you mostly just knew him by reputation up until that point.
Yeah.
But then, so there were a couple things that happened in the episode that I thought gave us a lot of hints, but not definite answers. So, like, there's the part in the flashback in Hill House when the mom is talking to Nell one-on-one, and she's like, Mom sees people here sometimes too. They're not here to hurt us. Mm-hmm. So she obviously has more knowledge of what's going on than she's led on to so far. And, then at one point, while she's upstairs kind of looking around trying to find Nell, she opens a door and there's like a ghost kid in a wheelchair that comes by, and she didn't even seem fazed by it. Like, she didn't scream or freak out or anything.
Yeah.
So it makes me think that she's like almost maybe like exploring the ghosts of the house, or like not scared about it, or trying to find more information or something. Like, there's something there where everyone else is freaked out by the ghosts and the haunting and the weird stuff. She seems more intrigued by it.
Well, it was almost like when she saw those, like the old lady and the guy in the wheelchair, that she was like in a trance. Mm-hmm. So it was like, that's what I wondered, if that's when like the trance started, because she woke up and she had no idea what was going on and said, just basically continued the conversation. But
okay, I didn't know if the trance started right before or right after that.
Yeah, it could have been either one, honestly.
Okay,
but yeah,
there's definitely something going on. Yeah, and and because then the dad asked the mom where she was after thinks he's been chasing her all over the upstairs,
right?
And she doesn't understand what's going on, and so that's when I kind of had the idea of maybe like a possession type thing happening with her.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting things, and I kind of wonder. I almost wonder if like the mom was trying to, like when the night that she died, if she was trying to do something to like protect the kids, like she was doing some type of ritual or some type of something to try and get rid of the negative forces in the house. And so she died doing that. So technically, I mean, she did something that ended with her dead, but it isn't like technically suicide because she wasn't trying to kill herself. She was trying to get rid of something else. She wasn't powerful enough to stop her or something.
Yeah, there's something. Yeah, there's something like that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So this is a little switching topics, but do you think at the very end of the episode there was a scene where Shirley, after the big blow up with the family and after she kicks out Theo, where she's down in the basement and she opens a closet and she finds Kevin and Theo there in what looks like a compromising position between the two of them?
Yeah.
Do you think there was actually anything going on between the two of them?
I don't know, man. Like, initially you want to say yes because like of like what it looked like when you were going in, but with this show they'll do one thing and it's totally something different. So I don't know, like
I felt like it had to be a fake out. Like I think that she opened the door at like just the wrong time to where it looked like that. They were probably in an argument about something, and but I don't think there is, because I don't think Theo's into dudes based on previous evidence.
Yeah, and one thing in the other argument in the other way was like she was super drunk, like she was just drinking nonstop.
True. So
she could have made a stupid decision, but and one thing that kind of frustrates me about the show is it's just like how high and mighty Shirley seems. Like it's frustrating
all the time.
Yeah, it was like, I mean, obviously she had never had any money struggles. Otherwise, she'd be like, "Yeah, I'll take that money from you, Steven, even though you wrote this, story about something that you." I don't know. It just kind of bothers me. It's like what she says goes with these, with these kids. Maybe she took the role of mom when mom died, but still, it was just like, gosh. So that kind of became annoying a little bit to me. But specifically, I'm not sure. I would be willing to bet that it was something else was going on, and but it's also super strange that your husband and sister are down in the basement in like a storage closet.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I got one final point that I wanted to come back to that I kind of foreshadowed a little bit earlier, and that's, you were talking about how they're like all drunk in the next room arguing when they're supposed to be there, like for Nell. So throughout the whole episode, you keep seeing Nell's ghost, but no one really reacts to it or acknowledges it. And in the 1992 flashback, the culmination of the whole story was they found Nell, she was right there in that entryway the whole time, and she was crying and saying, "I was standing here the whole time and yelling and screaming and you couldn't see me. Why couldn't you see me?" And then in the present time, she's there and they're ostensibly all there to be, like mourning her passing and are there for the funeral, but they spend the whole time just arguing and fighting amongst each other and talking about a bunch of other stuff. And the ghost is there, but it's like unacknowledged, whereas in the past, anytime you saw a ghost, it was like very front and center. So I wonder if both those things were meant to emphasize that the family was like putting other things ahead of her all the time.
Oh, okay.
Like, all of their own personal stuff got in the way of them even just, like, being civil at her funeral, or even, like, talking about her that much. Like, there was that one scene, but beyond that. And it was like they were too busy fighting with each other and dealing with their own drama to even, like, remember why they were there. And it was kind of this... I wondered if maybe it was a similar type thing in the house in the flashback of, you know, she just kind of got lost in the shuffle as everybody else was worried about the house and hail and the storm and the mom and dad upstairs and all of that. And I don't really know what significance that plays in the larger story of the series, but I thought it was just interesting, like, social commentary. Like, how often have we seen that happen where, you know, we've been in a situation and are so distracted by our own stuff that we're not doing what we're there to do.
Yeah, I mean, something for sure is going on, but the thing that confuses me is, like, she all of a sudden disappeared. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure, man. Yeah. That's I'm sure that you would think that they would come back and explain what happened during that time, you know, but who knows? Who knows? So I wonder if do you think that if that's signifying that she's... I guess she would still have to be dead because her body's there. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know with this show anymore.
Yeah. Interesting food for thought, at any rate.
Yeah.
So. But speaking of thought, I've got a couple of random ones.
Oh, okay.
All right. So you know how a while back I complained about something that bothers me a lot in movies is talking about talking?
Yep.
So the dialogue is like, can I say something? No, you can't say something. I really want to say something. You cannot say that, young lady. Like, that's so lazy and terrible dialogue. Like, writing, I hate it. The newest thing that makes me cringe is the kissing sound effect.
Oh.
So anytime you see two people on screen kiss, you're going to hear a very specific sound effect. That it's the same one regardless of how they kiss or how long they kiss, and it's awkward, and it's the same like in every TV show and movie, and it's like nails on a chalkboard to me at this point. And so I wanted to ruin it for you too. You're welcome.
Well, you're not going to ruin it for me because I will not let negativity ruin love.
Fair enough. Another thing, and this is just for if you go back and rewatch the 6th episode, just keep this in mind and it'll give you something to cheer for. Shirley's husband really, really wanted to get Luke a glass of iced tea.
He so did.
And he would not be deterred. And people kept trying to get in the way and not let it happen, but by God, in the end, he got what he wanted, and he made it happen. And that was really the only thing that made me feel like happy and uplifted in these 2 episodes.
Yeah. So does this mean, going back to the kissing sound, does this mean that anytime you're saying something I don't want to hear, I just have to make the kissing sound?
Don't you dare.
I'm holstering it for Christmas, man.
Oh, man, yeah. And then my last one was, isn't it crazy how they bought that house to flip it, but in none of the flashbacks you see any construction or renovation happening?
Yeah, it just seems like everything's kind of there and they're just living there. But how many days do you think it is of the past that we've seen?
Well, that's actually a really good question. And that my statement just now actually made me think about that yesterday. You know, because how much of the time in the house have we really seen? Because we don't know how far or how long they even live there, really. We've seen definitely the first night and the second night. We've seen a bunch of in-between stuff, and then we've seen the last night that they were there. But the kids didn't seem to age a lot in between, but it could still be, you know, a year or two. So, who knows? Or it could be like a month. Yeah, we'll see. Surely they'll tell that too, but maybe not. Yeah, we'll find out. Yeah, so far, been super good. Yeah, episode 5, super dense. Definitely worth rewatching. Well, cool. Anything else? Nope. All right, then. I guess join us next time for a review of episodes 7 and 8 of The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix.
Yep, sounds good. Miss you guys. Love and kisses.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.